Before we start the video off, I want to go ahead and thank you guys for showing so much support for our previous video, the Precious Scars solar build. It means a lot to me since I put a lot of work into that video that you guys have liked and viewed the video so much. In fact, it's actually the most viewed video I've put out in a long time. But yeah, I really do appreciate you guys. And I really hope that you enjoy this new video about the Broodweaver build, and we're going to go ahead and get into it. Starting things off, we're going to be using Swarmers. Swarmers are an exotic leg armor for Warlocks, and Swarmers state that destroying a tangle spawns a Threadling. Your Threadlings unravel targets that they damage as well. This piece is going to be centered to our build, so anytime we throw a Threadling out into the battlefield, that Threadling would then unravel a target, as well as any tangle that we shoot or throw on the ground itself explodes, spawning a Threadling. For our subclass, we're of course going to be using the Strand Warlock subclass, Broodweaver. In terms of abilities, starting things off, we're going to be using Healing Rift, followed by Arcane Needle, and lastly, our grenade of choice is going to be Threadling Grenade. In terms of aspects though, we're going to use Weaver's Call as our first aspect, which states cast your rift to weave 3 Threadlings and deploy any Threadlings you have perched. Now every time that we then cast our healing rift, we're going to have at least 3 Threadlings or any Threadlings that we have perched go out into the battlefield and seek targets. Followed then by our second Strand aspect, which is Mindspun Invocation, which states that your grapple, shackle, and Threadling Grenade have enhanced functionality. For our subclass, we're of course using Threadling Grenade. So what this allows us to do is hold to consume your Threadling Grenade and immediately generate 5 perched Threadlings. This allows us to get immediately 5 Threadlings perched onto us, so we can have maximum Threadlings just by simply consuming our grenade, or if we decide to, we can just simply throw the grenade and throw 3 of them out, as it says here on the Threadling Grenade itself. For fragments, we're going to start off by using Thread of Evolution, which states Threadlings travel farther and deal additional damage. So that means that every single Threadling coming from any source generated by us will go further, seeking targets and deal more damage to them. Next up, we're going to be using Thread of Warding, which states picking up an Orb of Power grants Woven Mail. This is the way that we're going to increase our survivability by reducing the amount of damage that we take up from the battlefield. After that, we're going to use Thread of Generation, which states dealing damage generates grenade energy, which is really central to our build since we are on Threadling Grenade after all, which means that we can throw more grenades thanks to this aspect. And lastly, for our last fragment, we're going to be using Thread of Ascent, which states activating your grenade ability, reloads your equipped weapon, and grants bonus airborne effectiveness and handling for a short duration. Now, it doesn't state it on this description, but it does actually increase your reload speed, and that's primarily why we're going to use it. This is to make our gunplay, general gunplay feel better. Some weapons that I'd use throughout the video do need a boost in reload speed, specifically the 120 hand cannon round robin, and this is going to make it just feel that much better. And for our artifact, we are going to use a couple artifact perks that make this build work very well. Starting things off with the most important artifact perk being Horde Shuttle, which states damaging unraveled targets with a weapon occasionally spawns a Threadling. This means that anytime that we now throw a Threadling out, which does unravel thanks to Swarmers, we also have a chance to make another Threadling by dealing weapon damage. And for our next artifact perk, we have Unraveling Orbs, which states picking up an Orb of Power grants Strand weapons unraveling rounds. For the purposes of this build, This artifact perk makes it so we can now debuff with Unraveling rounds, applying Unravel to our enemies, and potentially even creating another Threadling on top of that, making it even better than before. Moving on to our third artifact perk, Dragon's Bite. It states breaking a combatant's shield with a strand or stasis weapon has a chance to suspend or freeze that combatant. Now, this artifact perk makes it so we can now suspend as well. Nowhere in our fragments or aspects are we able to suspend, since we really focused on just Threadlings alone. This will allow us to apply suspend, so we now have access to another verb. After that, we are going to use Torch, which states that while radiant, deal increased weapon damage to combatants affected by Strand and Stasis debuff, which of course include any of the previous mentioned status effects like Unravel, Sever, Suspend, etc. For a fifth perk from the artifact that would work with the previous mentioned Torch, we have Flint Striker, which states rapid solar weapon precision hits and rapid solar weapon final blows grant radiant as well. This way we can activate Torch in order to deal increased weapon damage. Moving on over to our armor mods and stat split, starting things off with our stat split. Since this is a PvE build, we're going to always prioritize resilience. Resilience should be at least tier 9 so you can get the most out of it. Tier 10 is also good as well. Then afterwards, we're going to focus on discipline, so we can go ahead and have as many Threadling grenades as possible. This coupled with Thread of Generation would make it so we have grenades up all the time. And lastly, you can then do recovery, since after all we are on a Warlock subclass. This makes it so our class ability, our Rift, is up even more often. Moving on to our armor mods, starting with our helmet, we have a heavy ammo finder. I love running one of these, at least one of these, in every single build. This way I can find as much heavy as possible. When I'm doing team play, I also like to run a scout. This way we can go ahead and generate ammo for our teammates as well. And as well as a Harmonic Siphon, since we are matched in our subclass, and this is a build that centers around using, specifically in this case, our primary weapon, so we can generate as much Threadlings, as many Strand debuffs, and make use of them as well. Next on over, we have our arm mods. We are using heavy-handed, impact induction twice, 2 impact induction mods, so we can reduce the cost of our grenade. We're using heavy-handed in this case because we are using, for the most part, our Threadling grenades for its consumption. You can run a firepower mod for this build, but I do advise you that when you throw the grenade, that is the only way that you would be able to generate orbs of power with your grenade. Consuming it and having those Threadlings go out and kill enemies for you will not generate an orb of power with firepower. Next up, our chest piece. This is where we keep our Concussive Dampener and our Elemental Resist mods. These, of course, depend on the activity that you are engaging with, so these can change. And moving on to our legs, I like to run at least 1 Recuperation. This way we can generate some orbs, or some health regen for ourselves, as well as Orbs of Restoration to increase our ability, energy regen, and a Strand weapon surge in particular here, so we can do a little more damage with our either our primary in this case, or our heavy weapon. And lastly, for our class item, we are running 1 time dilation, so we can extend the duration of our surge, a powerful attraction, so you can pick up orbs that are around us in order to get use of our recuperation, as well as Orbs of Restoration. And lastly, an outreach mod, a single outreach mod, so we can generate some melee energy. As for weapons to use with this build, I of course recommend using a Strand weapon. This way you can get the most out of the build itself. The weapon that I would recommend using the most in this case is Quicksilver Storm, because it is an exotic primary, so does 40% more damage to adds, as well as it is a strand weapon itself, allowing us to make use of unraveling rounds. And for this particular weapon, the catalyst makes it so the damage type becomes strands, but not only that, the grenade version, the alt fire mode, creates tangles to help further perpetuate our build. For legendary alternatives, you could always use a legendary weapon with Hatchling. Hatchling allows us to generate Threadlings on precision final blows, or simply rapidly defeating targets with a non-precision weapon. This will allow us to generate more Threadlings that would then perpetuate to unravel a target and potentially make even more Threadlings beyond that. There is also a new perk called Slice. Slice states that casting your class ability allows this weapon to sever targets on hit for a brief duration up to a maximum number of targets. Now Slice is applying a debuff, which is sever, which means that you can then create a tangle out of that debuff target if you do defeat them. There are other weapons that I will leave in the description as recommendations to use with this build that either have verb synergy or they're just strand weapons that function well with this build as well. But this is going to be the end of the video. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you made it this far, I appreciate you dearly. If you have any questions about how the build functions, or any questions about Destiny 2, let me know in the comment section below. And if you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe and like for more videos as well. Peace.